There's a lot of bad people out in the world who do some bad stuff. For example, taking a penny but never leaving one, saying you were too busy to call somebody back when you were anything but, asking for a free water cup but then filling it with Sprite. And if you think all of that seems bad, well, it gets even worse. Putting video games on shelves. It's enough to make a person sick. But putting games on shelves, wouldn't that be the majority of people who are probably watching this? They say to never attack your audience. Oops, a daisy on that one. But as much as some people condemn shelf collectors, some people do defend it, or perhaps just don't think it's a big deal. Wait, hold on, I have a question. Some of you might be thinking, what is a shelf collector? Well, good thing you asked, because seeing as it's not an official term, not everybody would necessarily know what it is, and you wouldn't want to confuse it for something else. Check out this loser. A shelf collector refers to somebody who puts their games on a shelf, something we pretty much all do, but it's designated towards specific collectors that are implied to mostly care about, or perhaps only care about, owning and displaying it. But hold on a second. If putting something on a shelf and never using it is an offense, then we've got a lot of offenders. My grandma kept this cookbook on a shelf that I never saw her use once. What a jerk. Well, we're talking about video games here, folks, which are expensive. So, because these items are so coveted, naturally, people are going to have opinions about how these items are being used, or perhaps not used if the implication is that these types of collectors aren't doing anything with them. To which defenders of the so-called shelf collector might immediately say, whoa, 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 whoa. If I'm not doing anything with my games, then what do you call this? Good old staring at your games time. Pencil it into your schedule, perhaps one of the most tried and true activities of any collector. And the best part about it, nobody can stop you, not even your bedtime. Yeah, I can stay up late tonight. Quick question for you. How many of you had your own pool growing up? Yeah, not many, but how many of you knew somebody who had a pool? Whether it be a friend, relative, neighbor, or what have you. Yeah, a lot more hands going up. And didn't it seem like they never actually used their pool? For the people I knew, they never did, and it drove me nuts. I thought, if I had a pool in my backyard, I'd be in that thing all the time. Heck, I'd probably even find a way to sleep in it. Seems safe enough. Drowning can wake you up, right? Well, similar to the frustration of somebody not using their pool, when people see a game they'd love to play doing this, it can create some mixed emotions. But hold on a second, how do we know they aren't playing that game? Well, sometimes they'll just straight up tell ya, either directly or indirectly. Now, if somebody is doing a pickups video and just got the game, it's understandable, but it can definitely rub people the wrong way if somebody is sharing a game and doesn't really know much about it. Just take a quick glance at the back of the box. Well, it looks like you can do stuff, but when it comes to playing a game, how much is enough, and how would you even measure something like that? Use time cards checking in and out of your game room? A journal where you log your activity? I think most people would just think, why do I have to explain myself to other people? Personally, I've always felt that it comes down to how you're sharing your games. If you seem like you're boasting, it's not going to come across well. But if you seem like you're passionate and genuinely care, that's all anybody could ask for. And most people will be accepting of that. Plus, I think most people, and especially most older people, are pretty understanding that free time to actually play games comes at a premium. Yeah, you might just be a shelf collector and not by choice. That's just the reality of being an adult who perhaps has kids, a job, and that dang broken toilet that keeps giving you attitude. You want my advice? Hire a plumber and enjoy playing some games while it's being worked on. Games are awesome. I think pretty much anybody watching would agree, and the desire to acquire games is only natural. However, simply owning games isn't what gets people accused of being shelf collectors. No, it tends to come more specifically from owning the high-profile games. Nobody's ever questioned whether I've actually played my copy of Altered Beast before, if you can believe it. Heck, for that game, people are more likely to judge me negatively for playing it. But hey, I like it. But the reason why people can become skeptical of high-profile games sitting on a shelf is because they start to wonder if somebody only owns it because of its status. Back to my pool metaphor. Some people only have pools because there's a certain status that comes with it. Hey, this guy's got a pool. Can we use it? No! How come no one ever lets me use their pool? I suppose you could say a lot of it comes down to jealousy, but I think there's a little more to it than that, and it's more about seeing something go to waste. But again, the defenders might say, even though I'm not playing them, rest assured I'm still getting plenty of use out of them. There's a certain joy to having games on a shelf. Just knowing that you have them means something to people. However, when it comes to being a shelf collector, it's not just about having high-profile games. It can also come from owning a lot of games, with the idea being that you're collecting a lot of games because it looks more impressive and grandeur. But hold on a second, is having lots of games an impressive looking thing? I suppose amongst gamers it could be, but ask whoever you live with. Yeah, they love how video games have taken over half the house. Better yet, show your game collection to nearly anybody outside of gaming. Oh, I didn't know you were sick. Yeah, there's exceptions, but generally the best case scenario is people will respect that you have a lot of passion for something, maybe give you a, all right, this is cool. Was that comment worth spending hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for? Well, if not, there's a far cheaper option, sports games, or anything with no demand that you can get for dirt cheap. Although these days, it seems like those types of games are becoming fewer and fewer. All something needs to be is a physical copy of a video game and people want it. Any takers? Loading your shelves with tons of filler just for the sake of trying to beef things up is another great way to get accused of being a shelf collector. I mean, if games are just there for the sake of filling up space, then why even bother with them being games? Now that's what I call a nice full game shelf. But here's the thing, if somebody is buying up a bunch of games that nobody wants, who cares? You wouldn't see people getting angry over somebody buying up all the red delicious apples. Seriously, who likes these? Well, I guess we'll find out in the comments. In the case of buying lots of games in bulk for the sake of making your collection larger, I think people just think it's stupid more than they might be jealous of it. Perhaps they feel like it's deceptive when compared next to a different collection that is more curated. But I don't know, I feel like most people are wise enough to wonder certain things when they see a collection, like what are the games? So you can't really fool somebody with filler, and why would you want to anyways? But trying to determine whether or not people are trying to fool people with filler, at this point we're getting very close to who cares territory, if you don't already think this entire video is in that space. Plus, maybe a person doesn't think a bunch of games that most people would call trash are actually trash, but who really knows how honest people are being with themselves? You rarely see anybody admitting things like, yeah, half my collection is crap that I don't care about. In the end, you just gotta do what works for you and not worry what other people think. Which seems obvious, but you'd be surprised. It's human nature to try to impress people more than we all realize. Okay, but now I'd like to circle back to the fact that almost anybody who collects games stores them on a shelf of some kind, and how in and of itself this is actually a good thing, not something to feel ashamed of. Putting your games on a shelf usually means that you've taken the time to organize them. Usually. For a lot of people, it comes as a point of pride. We couldn't give a darn about interior design until it comes to our game collection. Actually, not true. We'll put up some artwork around other parts of the house too. Thing is, How we display our game collection is an activity in and of itself. You may head into the game room to play some Contra, and then 45 minutes later, well, didn't play any Contra, but I did spend nearly an hour reorganizing my Dreamcast games, so call me satisfied. Now, some people might think, what is there to it? You just plop the game on a shelf and you're done. If only it were that simple. You see, what makes organizing a game collection a little more complicated is that ideally you're trying to keep everyone with their families. And by families, I mean games for each specific console. All the Genesis games together, all the Super Nintendo games together. Oh, looks like Donkey Kong ran off again. I don't care how good of a game you are, you're not too good for your own family there, buddy. It can feel like a jigsaw puzzle at times, getting all your games together in the space you're trying to put them and in a way that fits. Not to mention the games that are going to get the special attention. I've been told I give this Earthbound box special treatment by displaying it the way I do, but it's huge. It displays itself whether you want it to or not. Plus, it doesn't get massages like some of my other games do. Dang it, Donkey Kong, you don't get a turn too. I always find it interesting to see which games people choose to highlight in their collection. It can tell you a lot about what means the most to them. Some people even make shrines for their favorite game or series. What can raise suspicions of being a shelf collector is if somebody has a bunch of games that are clearly just the most expensive ones out on display. The games are obviously out on display for show, but are they only for show? Well, it's not like a game is inaccessible when you display it, in most cases at least. In fact, I'd argue that if a game is displayed, it stands a much greater chance of being played than some of the other methods for storing a game. Some people load their games into storage bins, closets, or who knows what else. Now sure, you could still dig a game out, but does this look like where you'd store your favorite game you like to play? I have an easier time believing that somebody would play a game if it's displayed. But forget about what it looks like to other people. Ultimately, you're the only one who knows what you're doing with your games and how comfortable you are with doing whatever that is. This video is for you as an individual to evaluate yourself and to reflect on your collecting habits. Remember, one of the biggest goals of this channel is to encourage people to get to as positive of a place as possible with the hobby. So here's a quick little test for you. When you stick a game onto your shelf, does it feel more like see ya later or goodbye, stuck on the shelf to never be seen again? The idea behind storing our games on a shelf the way we do is often to make them equally as accessible as they are aesthetically pleasing to look at. Just a little something I've learned in life as a general rule. The easier you make something to do, the more likely you are to do it. And the harder you make something to do, the less likely you are to do it. I've been trying to cut back on shopping lately, and this wallet trick is going great. So if somebody's games are easy to get to and play, they're more likely to play them. The point I'm getting to is that having your games on a shelf actually makes you more likely to play them, and especially if you have them displayed well, seeing as having games displayed well tends to go hand in hand with having them accessible. You know what would probably be the worst looking way to store a game that would also make it really inaccessible? Losing it. Check out my copy of Rad Racer. Storing your games on a shelf allows you to have some accountability for where your stuff is because you chose to put it somewhere to be displayed. So if you're ever wondering, where's my copy of Sonic 2? Oh, there it is. But wait, where's my copy of Tetris? Oh, there it is. Gosh, I feel so responsible right now. And I know what you might be thinking. People actually lose their games? You betcha they do. If people lose stuff as important as their phone or wallet, but not me, then they can lose anything. Timmy understands. All right. But now that we've established a variety of reasons for why having games on a shelf is a good thing to begin with, let's talk about the possibility of having games on a shelf that you never play and not being considered a jerk by the gaming community for it, or a bad person. Now, some people might just say that if somebody owns games but never plays them, or barely plays them, then screw them no matter what. But let's talk about this. What if somebody owns a bunch of physical copies of video games, likes to display them, but never actually plays them because they play digital copies instead? I mean, as time goes on, this has become more and more of a trend. Prices on original copies of games have gone up over time, become harder to find, and an effort has been made to provide other methods of playing the games. Yep, you don't have to collect games to play them. Just don't put that on a shelf. Shelf collector. It should be noted, however, that even some people who own original copies of games still use these other methods. I use my mini consoles to play games I could play on original hardware instead all the time. Here's the thing about shelf collectors and the entire concept behind it. I just find it hard to believe that somebody would collect games and never play them at all by choice. So what we're most likely looking at is somebody who has more games than time to play them, which is seemingly any adult, maybe some kids too. Kids, remember while doing your homework to take a 15-minute break to play retro games. It's good for you. A shelf collector would either be somebody who bought more games than they can play, or somebody who buys expensive, high-profile games just for the sake of it, or perhaps both. Although supposedly there are some people in the sealed game collecting community who never play their games either, which is plausible given the fact we know they aren't playing the sealed ones. Whatever the case may be, a lot of people might just conclude by saying if you buy something, you can do whatever you want with it. And if somebody is enjoying it, what's it matter to anyone else how they're doing it? I suppose it would come down to whether or not you feel like that game is being held hostage, trapped in a collection where it'll never be used. But all of this leads to this video's question that I'm excited to hear some answers to. For those brave enough, are you a shelf collector? And sure, I understand each answer is likely to come with some bias, but my guess is that a lot of you will say you're more of a shelf collector than you'd like to be, simply because you wish you had more time to play games. And heck, maybe some of you don't identify being a shelf collector as a necessarily bad thing. So with that, leave your answers down below along with anything else you might like to say, and I will see ya in the next video.
He's the retro bird, yeah, and he's talking about video games. He's the retro bird, oh yes, and he hopes that you like